commercial space and a below-grade parking garage containing 18 parking spaces. The project site is located at the northeast corner of Valencia Street and 20th Street within the Valencia Street Neighborhood Commercial Transit Zoning District and a 55X Height and Bulk District. The project is seeking conditional use authorization to allow a non-residential use larger than 3,000 square feet in the Valencia Street NCT Zoning District per Planning Code Section 726.21. Additionally, the project is seeking conditional use authorization to allow modifications to the requirements of Planning Code Section 145.4 for non-residential use to occupy more than 75 feet of contiguous linear feet along a street-facing facade in the Valencia Street NCT Zoning District. On May 21, 2015, the Planning Commission reviewed a proposal to establish a new medical services use occupying approximately 7,100 square feet on the ground floor at the subject site. On May 21st, the project sponsor also proposed a small retail component within the lobby waiting area. Upon review, the Planning Commission requested that the project sponsor consider installing independently accessible retail spaces and also to conduct further negotiations and outreach with community stakeholders. In response to Commissioners' comments, the proposed project has been amended. The project sponsor today proposes to establish a new medical services use occupying approximately 6,775 square feet and a new independent retail use fronting Valencia Street and occupying approximately 325 square feet. The new retail space, as proposed, includes a new door on the street-facing frontage for direct access to and from the street. Since May 21st, the Department has received 3 letters in opposition to the project. Therefore, in total, the Department has received 12 letters in opposition to the project and 27 letters in support of the project to date. The Department has also received 1 phone call in opposition to the project. Of the 3 letters received by the Department after the Commission hearing on May 21st, 1 letter was included in the packets you received, and 2 letters were received by the Department after your projects were delivered. So I have these 2 letters here. Since May 21st, the project sponsor has conducted additional outreach with community stakeholders as detailed in the letter from the project sponsor included in the submitted packet. Department staff recommends approval with conditions and believes the project is necessary and desirable for the following reasons. The project complies with the applicable requirements of the Planning Code. The project is consistent with the objectives and policies of the general plan. The project is located in a zoning district where medical, service, and retail uses are principally permitted. The project is consistent with the stated purpose of the Valencia Street NCT zoning district in that the intended use will be neighborhood serving. The project sponsor is present and has prepared a presentation of the proposed project. This concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Okay, project sponsor, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Bahram Asahian with Sutter Health. We were unaware that we only had 3 minutes to speak, and we would respectfully ask for a little bit more time so that we can tell you what has transpired between May 21st and now.
Okay, 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. We're really happy to be back before you to explain that the value we're bringing to this project, to the neighborhood, and in bringing primary care to the area, and also to explain to you the changes that we've made since we last met with you. Our proposed clinic is to have 6 primary care providers in adult medicine, family medicine, and pediatrics. We will also provide x-ray, mammography, and lab services so patients can have one-stop care. We have extended hours. We're going to be open on nights and weekends, and we will welcome drop-ins, and we'll also take most insurance. We'll also go into detail with you about the retail space that's proposed for the site. The location is easily accessible by public transportation in both BART and Muni. Now, this isn't working, so Yeah. All right. In 2013, the Department of Public Health published a San Francisco healthcare master plan, and the Valencia and 20th Street neighborhood was identified then as a shortage of primary care doctors. The DPH report identified specific health needs that were needed, and we're going to address those needs, like chronic disease management, as well as obesity management. For women's services, we plan on having gynecology, mammography, family planning, and being a convenient location for moms with kids to receive care. As I said before, we're open for drop-in care. We're open nights and weekends, which will probably be longer than the time that regular merchants are open. We will be opening earlier and staying open through the evening. We also continue to work with all community healthcare partners in the neighborhood, and we've referenced these meetings that we've already had in your packet. Next one. This slide shows the area that we would occupy with a star at the SPMF Valencia site. Currently, and this is, I think, really important to understand, there are 73,000 people who live in this area, and there are not enough doctors to serve that neighborhood. To serve this population, 36 primary care doctors are needed, and there's only 28 primary care doctors in the entire area now. 8 of them are already over the age of 65. We know that older doctors cut back on their practice and that there is going to be a shortage, even a worsening shortage in the future, and this does not take into account 5% growth in the area. We've made phone calls. We found out that 4 of these practices that are there now are completely closed to new patients. 10 of those practices have over 4-week wait to get an appointment. We are building a new 120-bed hospital at St. Luke's, CPMC is, and that's slated to open in 2019. It's 7 blocks away from this clinic. The current St. Luke's medical staff is also aging, and our proposal is to bring needed primary care into the area. We are experts at recruiting physicians, and these physicians would be in support of St. Luke's Hospital and revitalizing that new hospital and that new clinic that will go into account there. We believe that our Valencia Care Center is a win-win for the community, and again, to revitalize St. Luke's and to bring needed health care to the community. A healthy neighborhood needs a diversity of goods and services, and the foot traffic and the care center that we are proposing will be comparable to 3 retail storefronts. This clinic's going to provide visibility, transparency, and approachability. The patient volume is anticipated to be about 20 visitors per hour, an average of over 3 visits per physician. And we also, as I said, this doesn't even count the walk-in and the unscheduled visits. And I'd like to turn it over to Henry Maustad, our architect right now, to explain how we're integrating this design of the care center and what we've done that's different from when you last saw this proposal.
Good afternoon. Can I have any extended time, or is this it?
That was it. What do you have there?
Well, I'd like to briefly walk you through what we've done to the floor plan, as well as how we've responded on the interior development facing the 2 street frontages. It's up to you.
Okay. Commissioners, I think this is an important project. If you can do it quickly in a couple of minutes, that'd be great, and I'm sure we'll have some questions for you or ask you to come back.
Great. We'll do it as quickly as we can.
Yep.
So after we met, I don't see the images on the screen, but that's okay. After we met, we studied the floor plan and studied this in terms of where a potential retail would most prominently and be highly visible, highly transparent, and be most connected to pedestrian traffic. We arrived at the location near the corner. We did study on the north end, but unfortunately that had too many consequences of a negative nature in terms of loss of patient care space and difficulty in patient circulation. It was compromised and inefficient. In terms of the elevations, we have developed and subdivided the interior expression to 3 zones on each exposure, trying to create a sense of activity. We have a retail and entry zone. We have an art and medical story zone on Valencia with an art wall facing Valencia as well as the mural. We have a medical work zone as well, characterizing an active open team care space. Along 20th, we have a very direct visual connection with the retail as well as a direct connection, which is important for patients, to the greet desks within the space. We also intend to create a very vibrant, active, well-lit, warm, friendly greeting zone. We believe healing begins here, as well as another similar staff entrance work zone for open work area care delivery. And essentially, we believe all of this together, we're able to meet healthcare delivery objectives, provide retail, as well as enhance the pedestrian experience along Valencia and 20th. Thank you.
Thank you. We might have questions for the project sponsor in addition. Opening it up to public comment, and I do have a number of cards here. Johnson Wong, Janet Riley, I think she's left, David Goldschmidt, Judith Tolson, Catherine Rauscher, Judith Jones, Ed Kirsch, Luis Cornejo, David Sewell, Rodrigo Santos, Stephen Suella, and Dr. Lisa Frommer.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Johnson Wong. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Northeast Medical Services in San Francisco. We're a federally qualified health plan, and I wanted to just comment about our partnership that we have with CPMC and Sutter Health Medical Foundation for our 32,000 Medi-Cal managed care population. We use our partnership, and I'm really here to provide support for the 899 Valencia Street Clinic. Thank you.
President Fong, honorable members of the commission, David Serrano Sewell, 22-year resident of Guerreros. We're going just a bit out of order, President Fong, because we have to get our groceries and kids and all that, so thank you very much. I was before you at the last hearing and just wanted to reiterate the need for this facility from a family neighborhood perspective, having access to this high quality of care, physicians, both adult and pediatric care. It fits neatly within the Valencia corridor where we have a host of amenities, and this would be a healthy addition to the neighborhood. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Judith Tolson. I'm the Director of the Institute for Health and Healing, a Sutter Pacific Medical Foundation integrative medicine program. We have an SPMF care center and a healing store on 2300 California Street just off Fillmore. We opened in 1998. It's very successful. It's utilized by the community, and we refer mutually to our merchants in the area on Fillmore. The IHH is committed to support the health and healing of our patients and our communities with services and products that support well-being. Integrative medicine services through Sutter Pacific, such as nutritional counseling, functional medicine, massage therapy, acupuncture, behavioral health. We support all of these with our retail service. Some of that is through pharmaceutical-grade supplements and nutraceuticals, but the larger part of the store consists of crafts from local artisans, small statuary, gemstone jewelry, natural skin and body care, health-related books, journals, scarves, stretching and exercise type equipment, and support for meditation and relaxation techniques. Our space is vibrant, beautiful. It's a healing atmosphere. It smells wonderful. And we understand also that it's not just the look and feel of the space, it's also the people in the space that create a healing atmosphere. So our receptionists, our retail clerks, our physicians, of course, and nurses all understand ourselves as contributing to the healing process for those we serve. When I stand as a director in our store area and watch people walk into the space, the universal response is a large sigh, a large out-breath, and a feeling of being welcomed at home, relaxed, calmed, and cared for. This is the kind of experience that people will have at the Valencia Street Care Center and in our retail store. Thank you very much.
Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Judy Jones. I am a primary care doctor in San Francisco in the Mission District. I came to San Francisco 20 years ago as a resident in family and community medicine at SF General. I have been committed to serving the primary care needs of the community ever since. I'm here today to support a new primary care urgent care center at 899 Valencia. I currently work in the Mission at the St. Luke's Primary Care Office for SPMF. Every day in this community as a primary care physician, I hear how happy people feel to have their doctor right there in the neighborhood. Every day I have multiple new patients from all walks of life reflecting the neighborhood. The other doctor in my practice and I both came from a public health background. Previous to this work, I worked at SF General in the urgent care. There was typically a 2 to 3 hour wait, but people from the neighborhood had little choice but to wait. To arrange follow-up with primary care was difficult as so few primary care doctors were accepting new patients. With the Affordable Care Act, even more people are looking. And at our Sutter Health Clinic, we take almost all insurances, including Medi-Cal. In this way, we sometimes help offset the bottleneck in public health that we know of and have worked in. It's not just public health, though, that needs primary care. In our office, we see everyone from Google engineers recently emigrated from Paris to formerly homeless living in residential hotels at 16th and Mission, to name 2 people I saw yesterday. And not only do these new folks in our neighborhood need primary care, there's also a large group of people whose doctors are retiring, as Dr. Brer was saying, who also need primary care. It's always surprising to find in my office a 95-year-old who is looking for a new doctor, but this happens all the time. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Catherine Bauscher. I live on Hill Street, 2 blocks from the proposed clinic. I am in favor. I'm in favor for personal convenience. We picked a pediatrician in walking distance, but their after-hours clinic is on the other side of town. The last time my daughter had an earache, she said, "Mommy, my ear hurts." It was 5 minutes into dinner on a Saturday night. By the time we got her to the other side of town, seen, diagnosed, prescription called in, we'd missed the hours for Walgreens in our neighborhood. So I ended up holding a sobbing child while my husband ran to the after-hours Walgreens, had to find parking, had to get in, had to get the prescription, had to get back, had to get the meds had to take effect. And so I am looking forward to the day when we can walk 2 blocks when she says, "Mommy, my ear hurts," and swing by Walgreens on the way back and get her cared for promptly. Extended hours in a community-based clinic is just an awesome resource for any clinic. These drop-in hours are also good for everyday needs. I, for one, would like to be able to walk to my regular blood work. I need, like many people, particularly seniors and complex patients, regular blood tests for monitoring. And the thing is, right now, it's such a hassle to go find them because our neighborhood is underserved by basic blood draw that I get them less frequently than I should. So this sort of extended care just is really a helpful neighborhood convenience. We picked the neighborhood for its walkability. The new shopping that is coming in is lots of fun, but I don't use it weekly. My real life, everyday needs are the bakery, the grocery, the gym, and the Walgreens. I want to see the more diversified services in our neighborhood rather than additional cute boutiques. Convenient primary care adds to the walkability and community fabric for both residents and workers. I don't wander Valencia to shop. I walk to the business and services I need, and that's how I discover new retail. Professionally, I specialize in innovation and strategy for healthcare. I believe that access is the biggest challenge our system faces today because they can't afford time off work, don't know where to or how to access primary care. The underserved all too often end up in the ER, many times unnecessarily or undesirably late. The southeastern neighborhoods need easier access to good primary care. This sort of visible footprint in the popular area will build access and awareness. Thank you.
I'm Lisa Fromer. I'm president of the Liberty Hill Neighborhood Association. Some of us made it clear to Sutter Pacific Medical Foundation that they need a workable transportation plan. We met with them and we proposed that they incentivize or pay for Clipper or BART cards so staff could access public transit. We proposed shuttles, maybe from St. Luke's for patients and staff, and even consider a valet parking system. In a very last-minute response, our proposals were dismissed, and instead they're negotiating to secure parking spaces from the developer and residents of 899 Valencia. When you pay $2 to $3 million for a condo, you're not going to be subleasing your parking space. And they're also attempting the same sublease scheme over at the overfull 21st and Bartlett garage, and shuttles have been abandoned by CPMC. So all of these negotiations are for the convenience of the doctors and technicians. It's assumed that they'll be driving to work. It does nothing to ease the burden for the rest of the staff or to ease parking for patients. These are unenforceable and unacceptable solutions for our neighborhood. In fact, it confirms that this facility will become a parking magnet and will only contribute to further traffic congestion. On narrow streets like 20th and 21st, traffic congestion is cumulative and it's growing with every new condo and retail space in Liberty Hill. And our real fear is that the lines of cars now on these streets make it difficult and dangerous for emergency vehicles to pass and get to where they're going. The streets here are narrow, and we're never meant to hold the amount of traffic that we're now seeing. When the river gets narrow, the flow of water slows to a trickle, and you add a proposed loading zone for patients, and the flow just stops. This primary care facility is in the wrong place in the wrong neighborhood. St. Luke's is only 6 blocks away. 7,100 square feet for one doctor, a few other health professionals, and a 400 square foot store selling alternative medicine products competing with numerous nearby Valencia shops won't make a healthier neighborhood. We don't want a feeder clinic whose real purpose is to make St. Luke's financially viable, but it will give Sutter a foothold in a gentrified neighborhood that's becoming more and more affluent. Please delay the authorization until there's a clear assessment of its effect on the DA.
President Fong, Commissioners, my name is Bob Prentice. I'm here on behalf of San Franciscans for Healthcare, Housing, Jobs, and Justice. It's a coalition of over 50 labor and community organizations that's been active throughout the lengthy process that resulted in the development agreement between CPMC and the city. I'm guessing that one of the letters you just got handed to you was the one that we sent. Thank you. We obviously have no opposition to a clinic. The concern that we have is that the scope of this is not just about a conditional use authorization, but it has potential implications for the development agreement. And we're hoping that you will consider that as you make your decision about this. I'm referring specifically to the reference to the construction of a medical office building that would be on the site of the current hospital. Once the new hospital is completed, they'll raise the building where the hospital is now, and they would build a medical office building There's a contingency, however. It says that they would need a commitment of agreements of 75% occupancy of that new building. So it's still an uncertainty. And what we're hoping is that you, along with the health department, which shares your monitoring of the development agreement, would make an assessment of the potential implications of this clinic on the conditions that would lead to the construction of a medical office building. So what our request is to you is that you defer decision on this one. Ask the health department as a consultant to work with CPMC to come up with reasonable projections about the prospects of actually meeting the conditions that would lead to creating a medical office building, and specifically what the creation of this clinic might imply for that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Fong and the rest of the Commission. My name is Stephen Shula. I'm an architect and a resident of the 300 block of Lexington, less than 200 feet from the proposal on the corner of 20th and Valencia. I strongly oppose the project on the basis of the scale of the project. The size of the project is more than twice what was agreed upon development agreement of the V20 project about 4 or 5 years ago for independent small retailers along Valencia Street. The model is working at 20th and 18 project, and we'd like to see that emulated in this project. In the May 21st meeting, I thought Commissioner Johnson, Wu, and Hillis, we had a good discussion about independent vendors and what really constitutes independent merchants, the number of doorways, and what is truly independent retail along Valencia Street, what makes it vibrant. And we think that destination retail is very different than destination healthcare. You will not, with a sick child, you will not stroll for 4 hours and then suddenly take your child in for an earache or blood work. These programs are very different. The parking stresses on 20th and Valencia are very different. The analysis of off-street parking has never been, is slightly opaque at the moment. The number of condo owners who will give up parking spaces or guest parking spaces at 20th and Valencia has still not been vetted to CPMC Sutter staff. We truly ask that, going back to the May 21st meeting, that more independent storefronts be looked at harder that are truly not part of this project. Tethering this project to the critical mass around St. Luke's. 6 blocks away, the Salvation Army sites, deeper into the mission. If you truly want to serve the disserved or truly support St. Luke's, we think sites within a 300-foot radius would be better served. Thank you.
Kim Tavalloni, National Union of Healthcare Workers. Just want to say we are asking you today to defer this decision until you can work with the health department to come up with solutions to the problems. As you are aware, CPMC, there is a development agreement for the Van Ness properties. And from the union's perspective, I think the nurses would agree with us, there are problems with the DA that CPMC has not fulfilled. The traffic issues are there. CPMC, even though they agreed to pay for Clipper cards for employees, they haven't lived up to that. We think this matter needs more attention, and you need to hold their feet to the fire on this issue. So please defer to the health department and come back at another date. Thank you.
must have forgotten to fill out a card. Is it okay if I speak?
It's okay.
Okay. My name is David Auerbach. I spoke last time as an independent retailer on Valencia, and I am here today representing the Valencia Corridor Merchants Association. We oppose the conditional use permit. We met with representatives from Sutter Health in June, and they were unwilling to move the entrance away from the corner or facilitated plans similar to the one we suggested by the Planning Commission involving micro retail spaces to liven up the street. In short, they were willing to come and meet with us, but had made no attempt at coming up with solutions that addressed any of the concerns that the VCMA or the commissioners brought up at the last hearing. Their solutions were just renderings of different kinds of art and images of offering trees on the sidewalk. Based on their complete refusal to compromise in any way, we don't think Sutter Health is interested in being good neighbors. We believe there is a need for this type of service in the Mission and would welcome Sutter to the neighborhood if they found a more appropriate space. There are existing large spaces, some as little as a block away, that are sitting vacant. They would be appropriate for their use. As per the CU hearing for this development, the Planning Commission required that the commercial space of this building be broken up into smaller, several small spaces to be appropriate for independent retail. To combine it into one non-retail use is a step in the wrong direction, and we're hoping that you deny their conditional use to convert these many coveted retail spaces into a medical office. Respectfully, VCMA.
Commissioners, good afternoon. Peter Cohen, Council of Community Housing Organizations. I promise this will be the last item that I'm here for today. I thought I would only be here for a short time. Choo-Choo is also involved in the community coalition that you heard a couple of previous speakers talk about. Very long and very detailed development agreement that was negotiated over a period of time. And to the previous couple of speakers' point, it's important to not see this independently of all the other parts of the overall campus plan expansion and how they relate to each other. The medical campuses that Sutter CPMC have are all related to each other, even though they may register as independent from each other at ground level. And so, as has been asked of you, to make sure that you're taking your time and looking at this with the health department to understand its implications for St. Luke's and other parts of the overall campus expansion program, and to ensure that what the community negotiated as a set of outcomes and how they trigger each other's movement forward is not somehow being upset by this inadvertently. That's not to suggest that it is. It's just to make sure you're doing it right. I also want to make a point, just as a civilian, if you will, on the Valencia corridor, this area. I'm a bicyclist. I'm not a card-carrying member of the Bicycle Coalition, but I am a bicyclist. This is a high-injury corridor. There's a lot of bicycle traffic, as you can imagine. And one of the things that we know about these medical institutions, I happen to live on Noe Street, directly across the street from where a medical office building is to be constructed for Davies, is that there's a lot of traffic and there is a tendency for a lot of drop-offs. And it doesn't matter whether someone's stopping for 30 seconds or stopping for 2 minutes to run in and pick up a prescription or whatever it is. But the tendency for whether it's shuttle services or folks dropping off a patient or a doc running in is high. And how that's being mitigated is something, again, I'm sure the promoters of the project will say they've taken care of that, should not be underestimated, because that kind of behavior will happen. So again, just an emphasis to really figure out how this particular activity fits in a very dense, urbanized environment where we've been promoting bicycling and pedestrian activity. Thank you.
Sue Hester, I want to follow up on the commenters that raised the issue of CPMC and St. Luke's Hospital. It's where I came into planning, dealing with hospital expansions back in the olden days. What you have here is a facility that has a large amount of money to develop a place. They can develop a decent place and not be on Valencia. That should be one of the things that the Planning Commission looks at. Valencia is a neighborhood retail street. The Eastern Neighborhoods Plan, when this commission approved this project, They focused on small scale retail. That is a lifeblood of the mission on Valencia Street. We have a different type of construction and spaces on Mission Street than Valencia Street. They're taking a Valencia Street space for a Mission Street size, and it doesn't really do the pedestrian traffic is not dependent on this facility. The developer will be happy with this because he has a fixed budget. They will just be paying their rent, and they won't have any of the problems that retail tenants often have when you have retail spaces in here. I understand the motivation for the developer. He makes out like a bandit. He gets a really deep pockets client, doesn't have any problems. You should be concerned about how Valencia is going to work. Valencia needs to work as a retail destination in small spaces. The people, if you take a facility like this and plop it down, it hurts the other people around there. CPMC can move a block away to Mission Street or closer to St. Luke's Hospital. They can do their enormously great program at another location. That should be not your consideration. Your consideration is what is best for planning for the neighborhood. What's best for your deal for many years on CPMC to save St. Luke's? What is best for the retail development of Valencia Street? It's my neighborhood too. I live in Bernal Heights. So I'm asking you to stop. Say, this is not what we had in mind for this location when we divvied the retail space up. No, go to another place. CPMC, you can do it. They have enormous resources. Thank you.
Okay, is there any additional public comment? Okay, not seeing any. Public comment is closed. And Commissioner Antonini.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that we hear opposition defending all the high-end retailers on Valencia Street that usually are the target of opposition themselves. I mean, and so it's kind of, I'm sure that there would be equal other arguments against this project were it on Mission Street, or if it were closer to St. Luke's, then there'd be the arguments that it has more interference with the medical office building that's going there. But to tell you the truth, the Mission is underserved. When I was in dental school, we had a clinic up in Elk, which is a small town in Northern California in the Mendocino area, because there were no dentists in the surrounding area for about 100 miles. So we go up there and take care of patients. And inner city areas are a lot like this too. And places like the Mission District are not the first destination for young professionals, be they dentists or physicians, to start their practices. It's a challenging area, and what is lacking is primary care physicians. So there's a big difference between this facility and a medical office building, but this facility will probably help to make the medical office building more of a reality, because you will have doctors who will be there, will be established in the neighborhood, but then they probably will have offices also in the medical office building. Usually those offices allow the doctor who has many patients who are inpatients at the hospital to quickly go back and forth between outpatients and inpatients and attend to the inpatients that are hospitalized. But this type of facility is more designed for day-to-day visits, not always emergency visits, oftentimes elective visits. Somebody who has a small problem or just needs a physical or something will often choose to find someplace in their neighborhood. As I have, my daughter-in-law will go to West Portal to Golden Gate Health Care rather than driving all the way over to Cal Pacific, where they have most of their care, because it's a lot more convenient with 2 children and pregnant with a third. You don't want to make additional trips. So this is going to be a great service to the neighborhood. In terms of congestion, there was a study done. It wasn't brought up during the sponsor's presentation, but they looked at the impact of 6,400 square feet of all retail as opposed to 6,700 square feet of medical space, and they found that the number of trips generated were something like 1,065 for all retail, with 96 of them in peak hour PM, which probably is 5 to 7, I guess, or 4 to 6. And then the contrast with the all that space being medical was 320 trips per day, with 28 of them being peak hour PM. So certainly a lot less impact, at least by this study, of a medical facility than there is with it being all retail. So that's interesting, and they have done some things. We asked them to establish a separate retail space, which has been done, 325 square feet, with an independent entrance apart from the other part of the facility. So I think we've heard a lot of testimony from professionals that there's a shortage of MDs in the Mission District, and a lot of them are nearing retirement age. And so I think this is a good project. I don't see a huge influx of traffic around areas where the places like Golden Gate Medical, which is somewhat smaller in their scope, but even around some of the medical office buildings around the city, the traffic is more with people visiting their relatives in hospitals than they are people with their visits to the medical office buildings. I'm sure there will be some traffic, but you know, it should be able to accommodate. And they've also talked about the extended hours, which will keep the area alive during the evening hours, because there'll be lights on in there and there'll be activity. So I think it's a good project. I think it meets a need, and I'm supportive.
Mr. Hillis.
So thank you. I appreciate some of the changes that have been made. But I still have concerns kind of all along Valencia Street and kind of how active that frontage is. And you know, I pulled the old plans for kind of what the retail space was supposed to be, and there were 3 kind of retail spaces within that 7,000 square feet originally planned. And I'm less so concerned with kind of the activation of 20th Street, but more concerned with the activation on Valencia. And I think, you know, we've got about 1 1/4 now of kind of active uses I get, and I appreciate the additional retail space, and I've seen your space, the other space that you have, so I think it can be active, but that coupled with kind of the still we're looking at the walls of the exam room on the rest of Valencia still kind of troubles me. I don't think we quite got there. So if I can ask either the architect or the project sponsor, and I appreciate your answering questions for me in the past too. Did you consider alternatives? I mean, I think an additional small retail space would kind of greatly improve this. I know there's kind of a crunch on making this efficient and useful for you, but I think you have to balance kind of being on the Valencia corridor where there is finer grain retail to having kind of this space here. So, you know, did you consider other kind of independent retail that could work? It doesn't have to be huge, but a smaller space there.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Hillis. Vahram Masahian with Sutter Health. We did look at about 6 different test fits of how we could reconfigure the space to allow for more retail. Subsequent to our meeting with the Valencia merchants, we went back and expanded the retail by about another 150 square feet and added the second door along Valencia. One other option we looked at was looking at placing a retail component at the north end of Valencia, closer to 19th Street. But due to the grade difference there, we would need to ramp into the space. There was some operational issues that ate so much into the programmatic space that it really compromised the core competency that we're trying to achieve here, and that's essentially, you know, a primary care clinic. So we did study a variety of different ideas, but unfortunately they didn't really get to what we are trying to achieve here. and that is providing health care in the community. But I think that the retail that is there now, we haven't gone back to the Valencia merchants to show them this added retail along Valencia with the second door of access. So we are where we are now after some rigorous study with our architects.
So you were talking about shifting the existing kind of what you've carved out as your own, because there's kind of your own retail, which I think is good.
We were looking at a second retail. So the Institute for Health and Healing would have their own retail space, and then the possibility of an independently accessible retail on the northern end. Yeah.
I mean, I think that would go a long way. And I don't want to prolong this process, but I think that was the kind of change we were hoping for on this. And I mean, I know you've got operational issues in the use. I like the use. I mean, I know it's not always the greatest use to have kind of medical office or dental office on commercial corridors, but they're there and they can work. And I think they help to bring people in and enliven the corridor. It's just how much frontage you have on Valencia is what I continue to be concerned with in kind of the back of the exam rooms.
Yeah, we're trying to do, I think, something that's a little new and a little different also in this care delivery model, and in bringing healthcare more in the forefront and less of a kind of an ancillary or second floor type of a use. We want to have a prominent presence. We hope that the way we've broken up the frontage along Valencia into thirds maybe creates a finer grain, and in the spirit of being in a commercial corridor, a neighborhood commercial district, try and break that down a little bit. Right. There's an optometrist across the street that has quite a large retail presence there. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but looking there, I think that they've been successful in the way they've really made a very transparent open space, and that's what we're also trying to achieve here. And having the work pods where people can look into the physicians' workstations is another effort there.
Okay, I appreciate the comments. I'll see what the other commissioners say. I mean, retail environments are fragile. If you look kind of towards 19th, there's a couple vacancies. There's a curb cut along this block. If people view a certain block as kind of a dead retail zone, they don't walk in it, and it kind of starts to spiral into other businesses. So, I mean, again, I like the use. I like the diversity. I think, we've had concerns about like too many restaurants and things on Valencia. I just wish there was another kind of a little more activation along Valencia, perhaps another carve out of an independently accessible space. But I'll see what my fellow commissioners have to say. Thank you.
Commissioner Richards.
This is one where, honestly, I'm torn. I met with the project sponsor yesterday at length. We talked about carving out another retail space on the north, like Commissioner Hillis had mentioned. We said, please try to make it happen, because we went round and round. The original approval was for 3 retail spaces. I said, well, you kind of do have 3 retail spaces if you can put a third one in. I do get the merchant's position on kind of the dead space. I mentioned to the project sponsor yesterday, I drove from Valencia and Mission all the way down to Market and noticed where the dead spaces were. And there was a church and a school, and were just absolutely dead. They weren't, this isn't as big as that, but as I came down Valencia and I approached 20th, it got fine grain, this big space, fine grain. And I said, it just kind of like it sticks out. So let's try to add that additional retail space here to just break it up. Furthermore, we talked about the level of visual interest. Yesterday it was a great discussion. I think, if I were walking down Valencia Street and, I had just had a drink and have my shopping bag, it wouldn't be as visually interesting to look in at a workstation than it would be at a kitchen. I think that was the example that we used yesterday. The middle third is really, you got the mural there, but it's a hallway. And then you have your retail space, which I like there on the end. I think besides these issues around kind of dead space issues, there's this whole other issue with the development agreement, which, regardless of where you're going to go, that's still going to kind of follow you. But, I'd mentioned some additional places that might be of interest to the foundation, especially along 16th Street, where there's been a very large vacant place for probably 5 years. that you might be interested in. It's actually right up from BART, and 2 blocks from BART. So I love the program. I love the fact that you want to make this visible. I know how this viably supports financially, how it all works. We went through the numbers. I'm a finance guy. I'm just hesitant because I think you've got the right program, the right neighborhood, the right retail space in the wrong space. That's kind of where I'm coming from. And it was just a hard one for me. Would you like to say anything?
I want to address the issue of you keep talking about dead space, and the plan is, and you can see it in the renderings too. It's not a hallway. We're planning on having art. We're planning on having displays. They could be medical displays. They could tell a story. But as people are, and I've walked this street many, many times also, in the past couple of months. I was there just last Saturday when it was very active with Pride weekend. And even though it's now an empty building, it still looks vibrant. It's got a beautiful design. Sure. If this hallway, people are going to be going in and out. You're going to be seeing a lot of people on the inside of the window. The windows will be very open and transparent. And again, we're planning on having medical either artifacts, or we can put up. There's no end to the amount of medical interest we can create there.
So give me an example of anywhere else in the city where something like this works well.
Well, I just happened to have been at UCSF, what's it called, down at Mission Bay. And I had my daughter, my granddaughter there for a tonsillectomy, and they have the same kind of frontage that we would plan on having, and it was beautiful. It did not look like dead space. It looked very active, and presented a very modern and chic kind of view for the person walking by. Sure. So that's the closest that I've seen to it.
Thank you. Is the merchants representative still here? Can you take a look at the revised plans, and then after other commissioners speak, I'd actually like you to come up and tell us what you think of it? Thank you.
Commissioner Wu.
I share similar concerns. I would love to see, so the CU is in front of us for 2 reasons, for the size and for the frontage, and there's 94 feet of linear commercial frontage on Valencia. When I look at this hallway, the only people that would be walking in the hallway are the people going in and out of those 3 exam rooms, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't walk in the hallway. You're not accessing anything else. It looks like, I don't know if this is true, I looked on Google Maps, it looks like there's actually a door existing right now about the location of the mural on your plan. And so, having people come in and out of that door, I think when we're talking about active space, it's not just about having a beautiful mural or even a timeline, it's about seeing people come in and out, and I think that's really what the sense of retail really brings.
Commissioner Antonini.
Yeah, I have a suggestion for project sponsor that might work this out. I'm looking at the space that's along Valencia, and it's up at the very, northernmost corner there. Not northernmost, because you have your entrance to the building and into the garage entrance and things like that take up that space. But right where you have your staff workstations, it looks like, the way I figure it, you've got 12 workstations. You might be able to cut that down to 10 workstations and square that off and put a retail space there, which would be in the neighborhood of 300 square feet, or possibly even 2 even smaller retail spaces. And you still would have all the exam rooms you have. You would still have 2 less workstations. It would seem to me that would be a suggestion that I'm making to the commission to, approve the project with our advice to try to put that space in there, because I think that would answer a lot of the concerns about the activity on Valencia. You'd have the 2 retail spaces at the south and the 1 at the north, and then you'd have that 1 section in the middle where you'd look at the mural or you'd see hallway activity. So there would be an area that was not retail, but you'd see a lot of retail on the street, and that seems to be the simplest solution looking at the map. Yeah, would you like to respond to that?
Yes. As it relates to the retail on the north end, I was just talking to the merchant along Valencia. After that June 9th meeting, when we, it was clear to us that the merchants would really like to see more of that, and with conversations with Commissioner Richards, we had done a test fit study where it looked at doing a carve out there, but it would be approximately 400 to 500 square feet and would take 2 treatment rooms off of the table for the care center itself. We discussed it with the foundation, and it was very clear to us that is not something that they were willing to accept and could work with. It was a study that was done, but it was ultimately, unfortunately, rejected.
Well, thank you, but I think the commission is going to probably decide what we're going to approve, and there may be a way to do it. Maybe you don't need 400 to 500 square feet. Your space down below the smaller one was 325. I mean, I think that you could do it with maybe a space that was the width, the frontage might be a little less, but the depth would be back to where those 2 workstations were.
And I appreciate that. I think what the thought was that retail at the north end would be independent of the foundation, that we would essentially be subleasing that to a different entity.
Yeah, that would be a good thing.
And that would trigger in other requirements, ADA requirements, bathroom requirement, that would increase the size of that space unless we could,
otherwise it would have to have an entrance to allow them to come in. I don't know, every retail space apparently has to have ADA bathroom if it's built new. I'm not sure, but if there's a way they can get into the facility itself to use the accessible restrooms in the rest of the facility would be the other possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the difficulty.
Commissioner Moore.
When we approved this building in 2009 with a minimum of 3 retail spaces, and it was redesigned to accommodate 3 retail spaces plus, the idea was to have the retail itself give variation at a larger scale to the three frontages which are affected, or the 2 frontages are affected. What we have now is basically the appearance of the building as it meets the sidewalk. The uses themselves are hidden between a uniform facade, and what happens behind the planters and the glass line is basically not by itself adding noticeable variety. That includes a small suggested retail, because the sameness of the planters, you need to take a pen to really draw it for yourself to see how little variety there is. And you need to look very closely to see that the entire facade and any animation of the facade is really hidden between these same space planters. And I think that is where one of the major problems lies, that the one retail, however well it is placed, I don't dispute that, is just not doing it. So what this either requires is to look at the ground floor retail, the ground floor having more variety than what's currently offered, or to completely redesign the entire layout of the proposed medical facility. I think the way it currently looks, we are not getting the variety we are looking for, and I would have to agree with the Valencia merchant that the original approval of this building was contingent to it significantly contributing to the Valencia neighborhood commercial corridor, of which this current design is not really an ideal solution to participate with.
Commissioner Richards.
I guess the Valencia merchant, could you let us know what you think of the revised plan? I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
David Auerbach.
David, yeah. Mr. Auerbach.
Okay, so this is a little tiny change. I guess it would be similar to enlarging a waiting room for a salon, which is similar to how we view their retail components, more just like, this is a salon and we happen to sell some hair products, right? So that is basically the percentage of this operation that is retail. It's super tiny, it's micro. This is primarily a waiting room. It actually, from this plan, really just looks like they enlarged the waiting room. I don't really see a difference in the retail component, and I don't think it changes really our outlook on how it affects the space, other than making, the southeast corner or southwest corner, larger looking.
Okay, thank you. I guess question of the project sponsor. Thank you. Question of the project sponsor. When we met yesterday, you indicated to me want an up or down vote today. I say I can propose to continue this, and you can go back and try to work this. But it sounds like you hit a dead end. I can do an up or down vote. Would you prefer continuance or a vote?
At this point, I think that the foundation has been working very hard to put its best foot forward, and we've been spending a tremendous amount of time on this project, and we hope that given the healthcare needs of the community, that the Commission looks favorably upon this project. But at this point, yes, we are looking for moving forward.
Okay.
Commissioner Hillis.
I mean, I think you've done you've come a long way, and we've kind of gotten rid of a lot of the issues we had before that I don't think you're hearing us talk about. The broader DA is not on the table. There's parking issues that kind of. So I think you're close. I think there's been good progress. I mean, I'd recommend taking a short continuance, a week or two, to see if there is a possibility, because you've got some active things like the waiting room that I think could move over to Valencia. There's other alternatives. There's just carving out a 400 square foot retail space on the north side and potentially working with the building owner to use some of the other space for bathrooms. I don't know, but I don't want to give you us to sit here and design it and tell you we're going to carve out a 450 square foot retail space and you got to go figure that out. So I think my sense is you're better served taking a week or two and trying to really see if there's an ability to put that into this space and make that Valencia side more active. Because we like I think you're hearing from the Commission, they like the use, and we think it would be appropriate here. You've made some good arguments about why this use is here, but I think you got to compromise a little with the fact that this is a fairly fine-grained, sensitive commercial corridor. And kind of make some adjustments to the program based on that.
So just, a little bit of clarity. The design changes that we've made actually took, and this was tough for us to do, took space from our waiting room, and we eliminated a consult room that we feel like we really need as part of our whole care package in the revision. We did look, we knew you wanted retail space on the north end. We have met several times over the past couple of weeks with test fit designs over and over, looking at how we could accommodate retail space on the north, and without completely abandoning our mission, which is to bring primary care. We couldn't find a way to do it.
I could suggest. Yeah. You put your retail space, which doesn't have to be independently accessible on the north side, and maybe adding an independently accessible on the south side where there's the kind of elevator bank. I would just, I'd urge you, I like the use. Again, I could give it kind of another shot at this because I think it's close. But, we're ultimately the Planning Commission, right? Not the Health Commission. So you've got us over the hump on the use. It's kind of just getting us to make sure this fits in with the Valencia corridor.
I understand where we're apart here, and I'm not sure how we can reconfigure the space to continue with our plan for primary care. You need X number of exam rooms. You need to have all of our exam rooms have to be ADA compliant, meaning much larger than what we would love to build. We have to have hallway access that works. We have to have room for our doctors and caregivers to interact with each other, and we weren't able to make it work. I don't know if we can huddle for a moment and
Sure.
Can we do that?
Yeah, if you think you need that time, I'll tell you what this commission probably is due for a little bit of a break. So if
Yeah.
if we want to
Yeah,
take
yeah.
a few minutes and you huddle
That would
in,
be great. Let us
I
huddle
think,
and come
yeah.
back to you. Thank
You're-
you.
I'm going to make a motion. It's a good word. Rich suggested they put. Be easier for me to.
I am Rick Parnell. I am the Chief Operating Officer of the United Nations Foundation, an organization created by Mr. Ted Turner, who I don't think is here, Mr. Ted Turner, to support the UN. The foundation mobilizes the energy and expertise of civil society and the private sector to help the UN tackle the world's most difficult challenges. I'm honored that we could bring together such an esteemed group of people today to discuss an issue near and dear to my heart, support for LGBT rights globally. I'd especially like to acknowledge Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Leader Nancy Pelosi, Governor Jerry Brown, Mayor Edwin Lee, Congressman Carlos Bruce from Peru, Member of Parliament Annette Trettenbergetsen, forgive me, from Norway, and Charlotte Schultz for being here. I'd also like to thank our fantastic lunch host committee who have been instrumental in the planning of this event: Stuart Milk, Julie Dorff, Cliff Hopkins, Joyce Neustadt, and Charles Radcliffe. And looking towards the next generation of leadership, thank you, Sylvie, for missing camp today to be here to celebrate with all of us. So thank you for doing that. So let me say, as a young gay man growing up in the deep south of the United States, I never thought I'd see the day that the Supreme Court would legalize gay marriage. My partner of 12 years, Christopher, is here today, and we are overjoyed by this decision. And yet there is still so much work to be done for LGBT rights. In 76 countries around the world, same-sex relationships are criminalized. In 7 of these countries, same-sex relationships are punishable by death. Institutionalized discrimination and attitudes exist all across the world and affect LGBT communities in all aspects of their lives, in their education, health care.
Welcome back to the San Francisco Planning Commission regular hearing for Thursday, July 2nd, 2015. Commissioners, we are on item 11 for case number 2015-001201, CUA at 899 Valencia Street.
Commissioners, we have huddled. We have our architect here. Since we last met with you, we have had numerous meetings and looked at numerous designs to try and reconfigure this space, and we've looked at it from many, many different angles, and there is no way that we've been able to come up with to put in retail in that north end without making it impossible for patient flow, for our caregivers to be present in a way that makes sense for really what we're there to do, which is provide health care for the community. I would really ask for your yes vote today. We feel like we're bringing a fantastic project to this community that isn't, I think it's rare to be able to have primary care in a neighborhood and a vibrant primary care practice. And we ask for your yes vote today as the project stands. And on behalf of my team, I want to thank you very much for working with us. It's been a real pleasure to work with each of you and try and get this through. So we are asking for your vote. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Antonini.
Yeah, I just have a question because I was going to make a motion to include an additional space in there. I'm in practice. I'm a dentist. Okay, you have a couple less operatories, you share them. I mean, that's, it all works out. You've got 12 operatories, you've got 6 docs. They're not all going to be seeing 2 patients at the same time. You work with what your space is available. My office is a triangle, so it has to be configured in a way that we have a short number of operatories, but we're there 6 days a week, so we make it work. So anyway, I'm going to make a motion that we approve with a second retail space somewhere along the western side of Valencia Street with a minimum dimension of about 280 square feet.
280.
And we'll leave it up to you to figure out where you're going to put it.
Do I hear a second?
How did you come up with 280?
I just kind of did the numbers and sort of figured out what a space would, the minimum size of space. The other's 325, which is kind of small, but if they're selling their own products, they could probably have a little smaller space. It might not necessarily have to be independently accessed from the outside in my motion. You could have an interior access to that one, but the one you're creating elsewhere has to have an exterior access.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you very much. I appreciate Commissioner Antonini's attempt at a motion. I agree with many of the sentiments about the activation along Valencia Street. However, I also abhor designing in a commission meeting, and I feel that making that requirement is kind of a step towards that, and that's just sort of my stance on how I view the role of the commission and commissioners. However, I do agree, again, with the sentiment about the activation along Valencia Street. I think there are some people in public comment who pulled out some of my comments from our previous meeting, but not all of them. One of the things that I said was I like this use because it brings a different it brings a different perspective on the meaning of activation. Most people think of activation as you're going into a store, you're going into a retail, and people tend to think of things that aren't, retail and sort of commercial establishments and not park as not active. And I do feel like a medical use can be active, but I feel like the design here, the design changes here rather, get part of the way there, but not most of the way there. I think, to me, the real bar there is the fact that the retail space and the waiting room space are in the same area of the building on that corner. So it leaves alone most of the storefront on Valencia to be non-active spaces. And yes, it is that you guys have tried to make it visually interesting, which I appreciate. But to me, activation means you see people sitting, walking around, coming in and out of a door. It doesn't necessarily have to be retail, but I think it has to have some sort of human element there that I think is missing from most of the storefront on Valencia. So I was hoping more for a reconfiguration of the space, not necessarily adding a new retail space, particularly given that if you were to make it an independent retail, you have to have, like we talked about here, additional infrastructure, bathrooms and whatnot for that independent business person who would not be part of this medical use. But I got to see much more people life, frankly, along Valencia Street. I'm not even as concerned about 20th Street, but that Valencia Street corridor is one that we really spent a lot of time and energy on, both as a commission and as a city. So I'm hoping that there can be some reconfiguration of the medical use space, not necessarily adding a new use to create that activation.
Commissioner Richards.
I leaned over to Commissioner Antonini before and said, hey, I'd second a motion if you'd add a commercial space there. However, I'm hearing that it's just not going to work. That's why I'm not seconding it.
Commissioner Moore.
I believe we are up against a size constraint here because I do believe that the requirements they are putting forward are reasonable relative to the use. However, the requirements for commercial, including adding a second space, requires a back of house, which this configuration just does not yield. So I have to assume that the space, because of their space needs, is unsuitable for the desired mix that we as a commission feel responsible for, partially because we were heavily criticized now for years of bringing more commercial activity into the Valencia corridor. Now that that is working, I believe we have a great deal of responsibility to carry the banner and support that activation as we move up Valencia Street is still our responsibility. For that reason, and since they don't seem to be able to come up with another place, I make a motion not to approve.
Second.
Excuse me, Commissioners, and maybe the Secretary was just about to say this.
If you're going to make a motion to disapprove, we should make a motion of intent
Yes,
to disapprove and
for,
continue the matter and allow staff to prepare a motion for your review.
Thank you for saying that. As I was saying it, I was looking at my byline here and realizing that I was not properly saying it. Thank you for that reminder, and that would be the verbiage of the motion.
Commissioner Antonini.
I'd like to make a motion to continue, which was what Commissioner Hillis had come up with and give project sponsor one more opportunity to sit down and crunch it, not having to do it 5 minutes on the floor, but to sit down and see if you can come up with something that would satisfy the commissioners and make your project approvable. So that would be my motion, and allow Commissioner Hillis to take part in the vote.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion to continue. Thank you, Commissioner Richards. Is there a specific date you'd like to continue this matter to?
How long, project sponsor, how long do you think you need to come up with? A month?
Just the 23rd.
Commissioner Hillis is not back, but he's gone all the way through July.
Oh, they don't want more time. He's not. There's not a full commission for the rest.
Correct.
They don't want to come back.
I'm sorry, Commissioners. So the motion is to you're asking us to come back in a month and put another effort into coming up with a different solution set?
Yes, or longer, because we won't have a full commission for more than a month.
I think we really appreciate the Commission's flexibility in an attempt to making this work, but I think we're at a place now that we have put our best foot forward, and we.
You want to withdraw?
I think we just are looking for a conclusion today.
I withdraw my second.
Okay, so we've withdrawn that second for a continuance. There was a motion to with intent to disapprove.
That's right. And that was just in response to they're basically saying that they can't do it.
Really?
You
just said it. You're so close. Come on, this is like car mats, and you're about.
I even said you don't even need retail. It could just be something else.
I mean, if I may, I think retail and the in and out and the pedestrian, but I think there's such an important factor to have this service in the area, I think. And as Commissioner Hillis, you got over some of the big hurdles, and for the most part, the neighborhood, I think, understands and some of the neighborhood desires this service. I think what they're trying to say is commercial, I mean, even an art wall, even something to look in other than peering into exam rooms would probably be some sort of compromise or solution. It just seems a shame for you to walk away from this.
I mean, we can certainly provide more visual interest. I think what I'm hearing from you, though, is that you want retail space there. That's what I'm hearing. And we provide health care. We know the configuration that we need to make that work for our patients and our caregivers. And taking out that space totally changes the workflow of the area. We've already accommodated one less exam room, consult room that was in there. We've crunched down the waiting room space, and so we really feel that we have made our best effort to make this work the way you want it. The reason that we're being kind of hardball here is because we've actually looked at this design from so many different ways, and we don't see where we can come up with a retail space in the north.
Okay. Commissioner Richards?
I mean, when we talked yesterday, I think you got the right project, the right neighborhood. There's some issues with the healthcare stuff, but in the wrong location. There's new projects that we've entitled. There's existing vacant space, like I mentioned, on 16th Street. I really hope that you would stay in the neighborhood and find the appropriate space, and hope to see you back here real soon. Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yeah, since it looks like we're coming to a vote on this, I'm disappointed in the way that things are going today. Personally, I think people were pushing for retail space, but I still would have been happy with just seeing more activation along that storefront along Valencia, and I think there's ways to reconfigure what you have here without carving out any more exam space. Like even just moving the retail from one end of the building to the other would have been helpful. But understand that you guys also are spending time and money on this, and if you're not willing to do more, then that's fine, and hopefully you'll find another space.
Commissioner Antonini.
Yeah, I would be supportive of it as it is today, but it doesn't feel like there are four of me. So, but I also would be supportive of it it wouldn't necessarily need that other retail, but it would need as much activation as possible of that wall, perhaps maybe make the wall look into something that you see rather than seeing the movement in the corridor, which might be preferable to seeing people walking back and forth. And that
we definitely want to do this project, and we want you to be as thrilled as we are with what we're planning. Can you give us guidance of what you would accept in that space if it were not retail? We could try and make it look more vibrant. I thought it was pretty vibrant. It's people moving, it's work, it's art, it's it's going to look as vibrant as a storefront or a yogurt shop. I mean, it's going to look active there, but if you can give us some guidance that would meet your approval, we are happy to work with you.
Well, I'll defer to Commissioner Johnson. You can express some of what you think would improve that area.
Yeah. I think Commissioner Moore was before me, though.
Well, yeah, I know she's first, but
if you want to shoot an idea, we can hear you and then go back and forth on what you might have in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think there might be two things that, again, I can only speak from my perspective that would be helpful. The first is if you're willing to reconsider some sort of reconfiguration of your current space. I think separating out the internal retail that, again, isn't separate, right? They're using your bathroom and whatever, so you don't need additional infrastructure. Moving that from the Valencia and 20th Street corner to, I guess that would be south along Valencia, and maybe reconfiguring your medical zone would increase that sort of people coming in and out of the space and sort of seeing people, in activation there. So moving the retail from one end of the building to the other on Valencia would be an option if you are willing to reconfigure. If you're not, I think that we would need to see more specificity around that middle big part of what you call your art medical story zone. There would need to be a lot more specificity on what is there, how interactive is it. Like, you'd have to give us something to make us feel like there's more activation along that space. I live in Mission Bay, so I personally am familiar with those large storefront areas, some of which are sort of just blank walls, and I can tell you that it can be a detriment to the neighborhood if they're not well thought out. Not that every single doorway has to be a store or a restaurant, but there's got to be something there that allows people to feel like they're part of the fabric of the street and they're not just walking along. And to me, I'm much more flexible that doesn't necessarily have to be a store that you could go in and spend money and buy something. I think there's other options, but there's just not enough specificity here for me to be able to see it and support what's here today.
Commissioner Moore.
I think that the existing building is already in itself a difficult building to achieve more activation, given that the facade and the baywoods is really not set up for this large-scale use. It's set up for a rhythm of smaller pieces, which then have their own awnings and their own signs, etc., but to ask them with adjectives to animate in itself has serious limitations, and there's hardly anything we can say in order to make the space work for them. They have technical requirements. Many of them are corridor widths, turning radii when a wheelchair or ADA requirement needs a certain width of a corridor. So I think we're trying to make something happen which is almost impossible. I would like them to try, but I am not expecting that they really can. They have tried, and I think they have met their own, wrong word here, limitations, but the limitations with the space there is. We are not designing a building, we're working with an existing, very specific building which is set up for another use than what we're trying to squeeze into here. So I basically feel that there is nothing to be said anymore but to call the question and let it be.
So just to ask you a question, you don't think that any kind of creativity of a little coffee kiosk, moving the retail further away from the front door, maybe adding a parklet, being a little bit creative, adding a flower stand, even an ATM, I'm not crazy about ATMs, but some sort of injection to that wall would help?
I personally believe not. No, I think the requirement they also have for a certain view privacy, etc., is all in contradiction what we're trying to do. I think they have tried their best, but it's just not working. I think the building is just not set up for it.
Commissioner Johnson.
Oh, sorry.
Director Ram.
I'm just trying to I've been struggling with a solution here that might work for everyone, because it sounds to me like the commission is comfortable with the use and the overall size of the use, which is what it's in front of you. So I'm wondering if there is a solution that takes that last bay, which on this drawing is called the medical zone, and give it a very different architectural expression on the street. To make it look like a separate storefront, even if it's not a separate storefront. I realize it's visual, it's not in terms of activation, but just to try to give it a separate visual appearance on the street. Maybe it has a separate awning, maybe it has different things happening at the street where you have that continuous planter, which I agree is somewhat problematic in my view. And if there's a way to design that as a sort of independent looking storefront with or without Commissioner Johnson's recommendation that the retail space be moved into it. Ideally having the retail space moved into that space, but just designing it completely differently. They give it a very different look.
In color and surface or whatever.
Put an awning there where there's not an awning somewhere else. Do something at the base. Do something that's really quite distinctive from the rest of the storefront, rest of the street front.
Thank you, Director Ram. I think that staff also we're drawing parallels there of some sort of a exterior treatment. I think that's an interesting idea, but again, I think on the exterior of the building is where what we're talking about.
Yeah. Commissioner Antoni.
Yeah, I think there's a flower stop called the Bud Stop on Union and Steiner, I think it is, and there's no depth at all. It's all like a couple of feet where they have their flowers and they sell them from there, and there's an awning. It's very popular, and it would take very little space to put something like that there, and that would be it could be fairly long, and it wouldn't interfere with the interior activities. So that's some sort of a use that would be one that would still allow your interior uses and would mask those uses from the outside, because everybody'd be there buying flowers or whatever sort of, service may be coming out of that. So I think you're only talking about 2 to 3 feet of depth.
That's right. You're thinking of the exact same one I'm thinking about.
Yeah, that would be a good solution. A shelf, yeah.
Commissioner Richards.
I love that idea.
I don't know. Commissioner Wu, what do you guys think about flowers?
Well, for me, actually, it's not enough. For me, just working at the surface, just working the 1 to 2 to 3 feet, that's the front facade, it doesn't feel like truly meeting the original intent. Director Ram, you said something about the use size. For me, the use size really is the problem. It's the frontage and it's the use size. In alternate world, I would like to see 3 retail storefronts here. I put a lot of blame on the developer. I put a lot of blame on the commercial real estate brokers, whoever they were. I think that there was an intention when the commission passed this in 2009.
There was.
Okay. Commissioner Antoni.
Yeah, I think that, we talk about the Bud Stop, it could be, I don't even know what's behind it in that building. I think it may be a realtor behind there. I'm not really sure. I've never even thought of what's back there because all you look at is buying the flowers. So it's a very area, you should have seen it on Valentine's Day, anywhere around Valentine's Day. It was just crazy there because guys were coming and buying flowers, and almost all the time it's very busy. So I think a use like that could perhaps even stretch further along the front is really a good retail use, and it doesn't need a lot of depth. So I would hope that we could continue this discussion. So I'm not going to support any motion to disapprove. Would try again to continue this.
Commissioner Moore.
I'm concerned that our own wishful thinking about this is a little bit ahead of us. Even a Bud Stop requires certain kinds of things, that is access to water, an ability to completely shutter the thing at night, which is somewhat in contradiction to what this building and the use behind it is trying to do. The front of this building is a rather tall ceiling height, so it would have to go all the way either to the whole length or whole height of the facade, or it has to tie into a glass facade. There's some technical requirements to this. I'm hesitant to let the idea of animation be a runaway train without us having really technically examined if it works.
Director Ram.
Commissioners, that might make a suggestion that you could, because the motion to deny would actually have to be an intent, it would have to come back to the commission for a final vote anyway. Seems to me that one of the things you could do is have two potential actions happen that day. One is you would take the final motion to deny the project. The second is they could actually come back to you with something on the storefront so that you could see if those technical issues and the design issues could be resolved. And then you could choose at that point. So you could have two motions in front of you that day. One is intent to disapprove. One is to approve with a new revised plan of the storefront.
We still need to ask them if that's acceptable to them.
Of course, but that would be an option that you have. It has to come back to you anyway because of the intent to disapprove. So
Okay.
Let's take the vote. Good. That's what makes sense.
So we would come back to the commission at a to-be-determined date?
My suggestion is 2 weeks. Get this thing done. It's going to have to come back to the commission for a final vote anyway if they deny it. Sorry. And so it would be to come back either for a final denial or a revised storefront design situation.
So if it's something that we would have to do, then we would accept that.
So what's our date? 2 weeks.
2 weeks out, Commissioners, is July 16th is your joint hearing with the Rec and Park Commission.
Who's out that day?
Excuse me.
Commissioner Hillis will be out.
Commissioner Hillis is still out.
He won't be back until
September.
August 6th, but August 6th is extremely full.
Okay. Okay.
July 16th is the proposed continuance then?
Okay.
All right, Commissioners, there is a motion that has been seconded for an intent to disapprove and continue this matter to July 16th. There is the option of them proposing an amended project at that point.
Yeah, I think the motion would be, if the maker of the motion would agree, the motion would be a motion of intent to deny, and for staff to bring back an alternative motion of approval if the project sponsor submits plans for exterior modifications along the lines discussed by Commissioner Antonini, Commissioner Johnson, and others.
Is that amenable to the maker of the motion and the seconder?
Yes.
So at the project sponsor's option, there would be two motions in front of you that evening. Otherwise, it would just be a motion to deny.
Sure.
On that motion, Commissioner Antonini.
Aye.
Commissioner Hillis. Oh, excuse me. Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
Commissioner Wu.
Aye.
And Commission President Fong.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. The motion passes unanimously 6-0.
Give them an opportunity.
Commissioners, that will place us on item 12 for case number 2015-003493 CUA at 3545 through 3555 California Street. This is a request for conditional use authorization.
Commissioners, I'd like to introduce you to another new planner who you have not met yet. Excuse me 1 minute. Could folks have the conversation out in the hall, please? Thank you. Excuse me. Susan, could we take the conversation out in the hall? Sorry. I just wanted to introduce you to another new planner who you haven't met yet. Natalia Kwiatkowska joined the department as a Planner 1 on the small projects team in January. She began as an historic preservation intern last summer and worked on the storefront survey. Natalia has a bachelor in architecture with an emphasis in art history from the University of Illinois in Chicago and holds a master's in preservation from the School of the Art Institute in Chicago. And we welcome her to the commission.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, President Fong and members of the commission. Natalia Kwiatkowska, Planning Department staff. The case before you is a request for a conditional use authorization to allow Standard 5 and Dime, a former retail hardware and general store, to expand over the non-residential use size of 5,999 square feet into the adjacent vacant storefront at 3545 through 3555 California Street, south side between Spruce and Locust Streets in the Lower Village Shopping Center, within the neighborhood commercial shopping center district. The adjacent vacant storefront was previously occupied by Stride Right, which was a former retail footwear store. The project is considered a former retail due to its affiliation with Ace Hardware, which is a former retail store, in order to leverage their bulk purchasing rates. However, Standard 5 and Dime is a family-run business that has been operating at 3545 California Street since its construction circa 1950. With regard to conditional use authorizations for former retail uses, the Planning Commission is required to consider the following criteria in addition to the standard conditional use findings: the existing concentration of former retail uses, the availability of other similar retail uses, the compatibility of the proposed former retail use within the district's architectural and aesthetic character, the existing retail vacancy rates, and the existing mix of citywide serving and neighborhood serving retail uses. Within the Lower Village Shopping Center, there are 13 other former retail uses. These businesses include Charles Schwab, Gymboree, Pete's Coffee, Wells Fargo, Union Bank, Gap Kids, Chico's, Noah's Bagels, Papyrus, Starbucks, First Republic Bank, Bank of America, and Walgreens. In terms of vacancy, in addition to the subject tenant space, which has been vacant since last December, there are approximately 3 other vacant commercial storefronts within quarter-mile radius of the project site. The project will be compatible with the architectural and aesthetic character of the surrounding neighborhood. The project is limited to minor interior alterations to connect the 2 adjacent storefronts, the removal of one existing Stride Right projecting sign along the California Street frontage, and exterior paint. The 2 separate storefront entrances along California Street are being retained as part of this project. To date, the department has received numerous communications in favor of the project, including letters of support from the Lower Heights Improvement Association and the Lower Village Merchants Associations, as well as a petition with approximately 400 signatures. The department is not aware of any opposition of this project. The department has found the project to be both necessary and desirable at the proposed location. The project is the only store dedicated to hardware retail sales within the shopping center, and it attracts a diverse base that helps contribute to the viability of the shopping center. The project will fill a vacancy created by a closure of another former retail use. The project will not increase the number of former retail uses within the shopping center. The storefront merger is appropriate for the shopping center as it is consistent with the mix of use sizes found throughout Lower Village, and it maintains the fine-grained architectural rhythm of storefronts throughout the preservation of the 2 existing entrances along California Street. As such, the department recommends that you approve the project with conditions. This concludes my presentation, and I am available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Project sponsor, please.
Good afternoon, Mark Loper, Ruben Junius, and Rose. Thank you, Natalia, for a great presentation. I just have a few things to add. Standard 5 and 10 has been family-owned for 2 generations. It's been in San Francisco since the 30s. It's been in Laurel Heights since the 40s. So there's been a lot of talk, and this commission has had presentations about legacy businesses and maintaining legacy businesses in San Francisco, and this is exactly the kind of business that we should be allowing a slight expansion. Jeff Leopold took over running the business from his father, who started the business he started working in San Francisco as a clerk, took over the business. They were out in the Sunset of the Richmond, and they made their way up into Laurel Heights. Just a few points about what exactly is going to be taking place in the new space. The store itself is like a lot of hardware stores and variety stores where they have a lot of stuff in there. There's a lot of materials in there for people to buy, and quite frankly, sometimes stores like that can get a bit crowded. And so The new space is called Stan's Kitchen. It's going to feature homeware only. It's going to, as Ms. Kwiatkowska said, it's going to have it has a separate storefront. You can enter from the street. Basically, all that the project sponsor is going to be doing is knocking a hole in the wall so that customers can get from one storefront to the other. The project sponsor, Jeff Leopold, is here, and we are available for any questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, is there any public comment on this item? Okay, not seeing any. Public comment is closed. Commissioner Richards.
Completely agree with project sponsor that this is kind of a part of a dying breed of businesses, and we definitely want to make sure that they stay in business for many more generations. The only concern I have would be that the second storefront would always remain, the front door would remain open during business hours. Just read and act like it's a separate storefront, even though there's a hole carved in the middle. And the example I use is Cliff's Variety in the Castro.
Yes, that's right, and that's part of what we have discussed with planning staff, and it fits with the Commission's guidelines for formula retailers to make sure that they're as open and active as possible.
Sure. So I'd make a motion to approve with that stipulation.
Second.
Commissioner Antonini.
Yeah, I was just thinking between Standard and Cliffs are the only two of variety stores that I'm aware of that are left in San Francisco, and it's too bad because there are a lot of times when they fit the need, and, you know, I wish we had more in other neighborhoods, but it's certainly great to go to Laurel Village and have Standard there, so I'm very supportive.
Yeah, I'm supportive too. Nice to meet you guys. I've bought many greeting cards, birthday cards, light bulbs, things, and I'm glad you're still staying in business there and expanding a little bit.
Commissioner Richards, if you would be so kind as to...
Sure, it was to have the second front door remain there and be open during business hours, just like a regular store.
Commissioner Moore.
And if they would open another store someplace else, they'll probably get preferential treatment.
Commissioners, and there is a motion and a second to approve this matter with conditions as amended to include the second storefront door to remain and to be operating. On that motion, Commissioner Antonini.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
Commissioner Wu.
Aye.
And Commission President Fong.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 6-0 and places you under your discretionary review calendar. For items 13A and B for case numbers 2014.0133D and 2013.1109D at 2146 3rd Street. These are mandatory discretionary reviews.
Good afternoon, President Fong and members of the Commission. My name is Jeff Spears, Planning Department staff. The item before you is an application for the mandatory discretionary review of a building permit application for the property located at 2146 3rd Street. The project site is on the west side of 3rd Street between 18th and 19th Street in the UMU zoning district and a 68X height and bulk district. The proposal is to demolish an existing 2-story mixed-use building and the construction of a new 6-story building. The existing building is commercial at the ground floor with a single-family dwelling at the second floor on a lot with dimensions of 25 feet wide and 90 feet deep. The proposed new building is a 7-unit residential building with a basement level for parking. The new building will be 59 feet in height with a roof deck and elevator penthouse. A mandatory discretionary review hearing is required for the removal of an existing dwelling unit. The Section 312 neighborhood notice was completed on June 26th, and no discretionary reviews were filed by the public. To date, the department has received 1 email in support of the project, which is included in your packet, and no comments received in opposition to the project. The department recommends that the Commission do not take a discretionary review and approve the project for the following reasons. The project sponsor has revised the project to comply with UDAC comments, the Urban Design Advisory Team to be more compatible with its context and its lot. The project will result in a net gain of 6 dwelling units. The project will create 4 family-sized dwelling units with each 2 bedrooms. Given the scale of the project, there will be no significant impact to the existing capacity of the local street system or muni. The project meets all planning code requirements. It's consistent with the general plan. This concludes staff's presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Project sponsor, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Stanley Seidowitz, Natoma Architects. And Can we get the
laptop?
Can we get the slides? Oh, okay. This is a aerial view of the context of the project, and what you can see is that it's an extremely diverse architectural setting with large industrial buildings and then quite small single-family houses, so that it's really the full kind of range of architectures. Here you see the typical kind of simple industrial buildings, mostly singular materials, very, very sort of abstract. And then the kind of smaller scale of essentially sort of worker-type housing that was mainly built for the shipyards. So it's actually the sort of marriage of these two different architectural contexts that became the kind of architectural problem. To on the one hand, have this kind of traditional architecture, which is repetitive and quite delicate, and then this type of architecture, which is singular, large scale, made of only one material, very taut, and kind of a very prevalent language in the context. This is the building one door away from our project on 3rd Street. And you can see that this kind of sawtooth language, which is part of the kind of architecture of the context at the bigger scale, and also these distorted types of bays were introduced in this project, and it was from this project that the sort of inspiration for our project came. And so it's a continuation of that language of merging the industrial and the domestic. So here you see a view of 3rd Street and our project on 3rd Street as a sort of continuation of the new scale of residential buildings. And another view of our building with these folded bays, which are in the sort of sawtooth language of the industrial buildings, singular in the kind of material of taut and sort of stripped of articulation and detail, just like the industrial buildings. And here you see the existing building plan and our new plan with the expanded rear yard and the matching light well, which responds to the light well of the adjacent building. This is a diagram showing the allowable height of the project and then the actual height of our building, which is a floor less than what would be permitted. This shows the way our interpretations of these industrial type of bays conform to the requirements of the typical bay window and the various floor plans of the project. So essentially, the section and the front and rear elevations, the side elevations with the light well and without the light well, and views of the building. So like all of our projects around the city, we've tried to respond very specifically to the particular and unique architecture that is in this location. And just to show you some of our other responses, this is on Sutter Street, where we've worked with the sort of tradition of the wedding cake architecture on Octavia Street, where again we've taken the kind of fine-grained filigree of the Victorians and reinterpreted it in a new contemporary way. And this is sort of our sort of project of building contemporary architecture in the city, responding to the context and being good neighbors and respectful of the surroundings. Be happy to answer any questions.
We may have questions for you. Thank you. Okay, is there any public comment on this item? Not seeing any public comments closed. Commissioner Richards.
So I guess I have a question for staff. So as I was reading this DR, it threw me back to my first day here on the commission when we had a DR on 395 26th Avenue, where we had a commercial real estate office with a residential above. And we voted to demolish the building to build housing. And It was appealed to the board. Our decision was appealed to the board because we said we wanted more housing, more bedrooms, exactly the same thing we're having here. And the board voted 10-0 to uphold the appellant who brought the case to the board. And so I'm looking at this and I'm kind of going, apart from the architecture, apart from all this stuff, this smacks exactly like, mentally to me, what we had done before. And so what I'm trying to understand is how is the top unit in this building a condo? Is it not under rent control? It's not occupied. 26th Avenue wasn't occupied. It's above a commercial space, exactly the same thing.
Your question was, is it under rent control?
Yes.
It is not under rent control due to being a single unit.
So the one we had on 26th was, I thought it was one.
3 units, I believe. I can't remember.
It was 2. Okay, then I stand corrected. I thought it was 1. So it's not. You're sure it's not under rent control?
Correct. It is my understanding that 2 units
Okay.
or more can be under
Thank
rent
you.
control.
I stand corrected.
That's correct.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you very much. I 92% love this project. I love, I do. I love for the most part, I love the design. I love that it's multiple units. I love the use. I would have preferred in a perfect universe for the parking to be in the back of the building, but because of the lot adjoins another lot that's right behind it, obviously that's not something we can do. I'm just going to make one comment that I think might be for the design of the building, and another one which is a soapbox that I have to jump on every single time I get an opportunity. So the first is on the design of the building. I actually like the way that the sort of saw face of the architecture reflects the buildings that are next to it and around. That's actually one of the first things that I noticed. I go up 3rd Street a lot. I'm in the Dogpatch a lot. I live in the neighborhood, so I really appreciated that. The only thing is I think it's a little bit dark and gloomy. Maybe if we could, I know that it's a glass facade, and so I'm not sure if it was maybe some of the reflection settings in the renderings or what, but if we could find ways to lighten that wherever possible, obviously, given that it's a mostly glass exterior, that might be, the materials that you're using for the framing or something. But yeah, maybe the architect could address that.
The rendering does look dark. The glazing is actually a new glazing system where between the 2 sheets of glass there's a honeycomb material, which actually means that when you look directly through it, it's very transparent. But as soon as you're at an angle, it becomes more opaque. And so it's available in 2 colors, white and in a darker color. And we are going to use the white color. So actually, the building will be a lot lighter.
Okay, that makes
Another
sense.
thing is, I've become pretty obsessed with white buildings in San Francisco. All our new buildings are white because all the pictures that I see of the city, that are when the city was beautiful and becoming what it is, were black and white, and the buildings were always light. It's the Mediterranean sort of light and all of that. So the building will definitely be light, and the renderings are a little dark. I
Okay.
agree with you.
Great, that brought my 92 up to 97%. I love it, and I hope that the company that makes that either the interior or I think the glass, I'm sure it comes as one piece, that they consider pastels in their future. That might be great. The only other thing is, again, love the project, very supportive. Just a soapbox I got to jump on. This was a mixed-use building, and although the actual use space in the bottom, I believe, was empty for a while, then it was like an art gallery or something. I always gotta make that pitch for retail space along 3rd Street. We see a lot of buildings that are being built within Dogpatch that are part of the Eastern Neighborhoods Plan that make the argument that they don't need retail space because everyone goes to 3rd Street, and that is supposed to be the retail corridor. So to have buildings go up on 3rd Street that don't include retail, one, it makes it harder for those other developers to have that argument hold water, and 2, it just makes our job more difficult because we're seeing spaces that were mixed use now becoming residential, and so we're getting left with fewer and fewer retail spaces. And that's not for this project. That's the soapbox I jump on all the time. And basically, it just means that the next time we have a project that's off of Third, and they come and say, "Well, we don't know. We were not going to put it in here. The foot traffic's on Third." We'll say, "Well, clearly that's not always the case." But support of the project. Think it's a great design. Good job with this.
Commissioner Antonini.
Well, one of the criteria we're supposed to have is the project conserves the neighborhood character, and staff has said the project will conserve the neighborhood character by constructing a replacement building that's compatible with regards to materials, massing, and roofline surrounding neighborhood. It looks like almost everything else is punched windows. We don't see too many all-glass buildings around this in Dogpatch, so I think that's not really compatible with the neighborhood. I would have preferred to have seen a building that, was echoed more. Even the industrial building had definite windows, and it seems to be out of place to me in Dogpatch, and so I'm not sure I can be supportive just on design, but I think the rest of it's a great idea. It does all the right things. Provides housing, provides some family units, and it's a very good use.
Commissioner Moore.
Thanks God, we can still design good contemporary architecture. I think it's a lovely building. I am glad that you are having the ability to have a white comb material. I wish we could see a sample, but knowing from the past that your renderings are always darker than what you're intending to do, I feel comfortable that what you are saying will be true, and I am in full support of the building. I like the whimsical way of interpreting the bay. Since the building is small, I think it will be a lovely juxtaposition in terms of scale and newness, and I think that's where its strength is. I move to not take DR, approve the demolition and new construction as proposed. I'm not sure if the demolition is part of our approval. It is?
Yes.
Okay. That is what I'm asking for.
Second.
Commissioner Johnson.
Not to belabor, but just to Commissioner Antonini, definitely understand the sentiment, but I would just say that there are a number of new projects going up, loft projects and whatnot, that do have sort of larger glass windows, even if the facade isn't 100% glass. They're higher ceilings, lots of glass, so there is precedent for that style of facade in the neighborhood.
Commissioners, there is a motion and a second to not take DR and approve the demolition and new construction. On that motion, Commissioner Antonini.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
Commissioner Wu.
Aye.
And Commission President Fong.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 6-0 and places you on general public comment, for which I have no speaker cards.
Is there any general public comment tonight? Okay, not seeing any. Public comment is closed, and the meeting is adjourned.
What's that?